I know you're not going to believe me. Hell, I wouldn't believe me either if I hadn't lived through it myself. But I need to tell someone what really happened out there, and maybe putting it into words will help me make sense of it all. I was always the kind of guy who needed to see something with my own eyes before I'd believe it. Show me the proof, show me the evidence. That was always my way. I didn't buy into ghost stories or conspiracy theories or any of that stuff. I believed in what I could touch, what I could measure, what made sense. I grew up practical, learned to trust my hands and my eyes and nothing else. My old man taught me that. He was a logger too, spent his whole life in the woods, and he always said if you can't see it with your own eyes, it probably isn't there. But what happened to me in those 6 days changed everything I thought I knew about the world, changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. It was late spring when our crew got sent out to this remote site in the Pacific Northwest. Way out there, the kind of place where you drive for 2 hours on paved roads and then another hour on logging roads that barely deserve the name. The kind of roads that shake your truck apart and make you wonder if you're ever going to make it back to civilization. The company got the contract dirt cheap, which should have been our first warning sign, but we were just happy to have the work. Jobs had been slow that year, and we needed the money. Bills don't stop coming just because the work dries up. I was the site supervisor, which meant I was responsible for the equipment and making sure everything got done right. It also meant I was usually the last one to leave at the end of the day. That was fine by me. I liked the responsibility, liked knowing that I was the one making sure things ran smooth. The first week went smooth enough. Hard work, sure, but that was nothing new. We were used to it. Cut timber, clear the land, move the equipment, repeat. It was the rhythm we all knew, had done 100 times before on 100 different sites. The crew was good, experienced guys who knew what they were doing. We'd set up a basic camp with a couple trailers for equipment storage and a place to eat lunch. Nothing fancy, just functional. A place to get out of the sun, grab a sandwich, maybe catch 10 minutes of rest before getting back to it. The nearest town was about 40 minutes away down that terrible road, a small place with one main street, a general store, a diner, and not much else. Population maybe 500 if you counted all the farms around it. That's where we'd head every evening, grab dinner at the diner, maybe a beer at the little bar attached to it, then crash at the one motel in town. It was a simple routine and we all settled into it quick. But the locals, they were strange about the whole thing from the very start. You could see it in their faces when we mentioned where we were working. They'd get this look, this tight expression, like they wanted to say something but thought better of it. Like they knew something we didn't and weren't sure if they should share it. In the general store that first week, this old man was working the register when I bought some supplies. He had to be 70, maybe older, with hands that looked like they'd worked hard his whole life. He rang me up slow, methodical, and then just looked at me for a second. His eyes had this quality I couldn't quite read. Then he said something under his breath, something about the old families in those woods. His voice was quiet, almost like he was talking to himself more than to me. I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and bagged my stuff without looking at me again. The guys laughed about it later when I told them, made jokes about hillbillies and backwoods superstitions. We were city boys, or close enough, and we didn't put much stock in that kind of talk. But I remember that old man's face, the way he looked at me, like he felt sorry for me. The second week, things started getting weird. At first, it was just sounds. We'd be working, and you'd hear these calls coming from deep in the forest. Not bird calls, not anything we recognized. Deep whooping sounds that would echo through the trees and make your chest vibrate. The kind of sound that makes you stop what you're doing and listen, makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. They'd come at random times, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, always from somewhere deep in the trees where we couldn't see. Then there were the footsteps. When the equipment was shut off and everything went quiet for lunch or a break, you could hear something moving through the underbrush, heavy footfalls, breaking branches, rustling through the undergrowth. Big enough that you knew it wasn't a deer or anything small. But you could never see what was making the noise. The forest would go quiet and you'd hear it moving, and then it would stop and there'd be nothing but silence again. One morning we came to the site and there were these massive handprints in the mud near our water tank. I mean massive, bigger than my hand spread out by half again. I put my hand next to one just to compare, and it was like comparing a child's hand to an adult's. 5 fingers, clear as day, pressed deep into the mud like whatever made them was heavy. Really heavy. The palm print was maybe 10 inches across and the fingers had left deep impressions. Some of the guys got nervous about that one. You could see it in their faces, the way they kept looking at the tree line. But we all laughed it off, because what else were we going to do? That's when the monster squirrel joke started. One of the younger guys, trying to break the tension, said maybe it was a really big squirrel. Everyone laughed and it became our thing. Anytime something strange happened, someone would say, "Must have been the monster squirrel," and we'd all crack up. Tools would go missing overnight. We'd blame the monster squirrel. Equipment would get moved. Monster squirrel did it. Someone's lunch would disappear from the cooler. Monster squirrel was hungry. It became our running gag, our way of dealing with things that didn't quite add up, a way to laugh off the fear that was starting to creep into all of us. But I'll be honest, I wasn't laughing as hard as the others. Something about the place felt wrong, felt off in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. There was this smell that would hit you some mornings, this rank, musky odor that wasn't like anything natural I'd ever smelled before. Not like a bear or a deer or anything else you'd expect to find in the woods. It was heavier than that, more pungent, with this undertone that made your stomach turn. And the forest was too quiet sometimes, like everything in it was holding its breath. Birds would stop singing, insects would stop buzzing, and you'd be surrounded by this oppressive silence that felt like it was pressing in on you from all sides. But I was a supervisor. I couldn't let the guys see me spooked. Couldn't let them know that their boss was getting nervous. So I kept my mouth shut and did my job and tried to ignore the feeling in my gut that something wasn't right about this place. Friday of the second week rolled around and everyone was ready to get out of there for the weekend. We'd been pushing hard all week and the guys were tired, ready for a couple of days away from the site, ready for real beds and hot showers and maybe forgetting about the weird things we'd been hearing and seeing. They packed up around 5 o'clock, loaded into the trucks, ready to head to town. I told them to go ahead, that I needed to do a final equipment check and finish up some paperwork. It was my job to make sure everything was secure before we left for the weekend. Had to make sure the excavator was locked up right, that all the tools were accounted for, that nothing would walk off or get damaged over the 2 days we'd be gone. They asked if I wanted company, but I waved them off. Hour, 2 hours tops, I told them. I'd be right behind them. We could meet up at the bar, have a few beers to celebrate making it through another week. They were good with that, started up their trucks and headed down the logging road in a cloud of dust. The sun was already getting low as I watched their trucks disappear down the logging road, the dust hanging in the air long after the sound of their engines had faded. Then it was just me in the forest and the sound of the wind in the trees. The evening light was coming in at that angle that makes everything look golden and peaceful, but I was feeling anything but peaceful. I climbed into the excavator to do my final checks. It was a good machine, a little old but reliable, and it was my responsibility to keep it that way. I had my clipboard with me, going through the checklist item by item, making notes about what needed attention on Monday. Oil levels, hydraulic lines, track tension, all the little things that keep a machine running. The light was fading fast, and I was hurrying to finish before it got full dark. I didn't want to be out here any longer than I had to be. That's when I noticed the quiet, not the normal quiet of evening settling in, with birds calling and insects chirping and the wind rustling through the leaves. This was different. This was absolute silence. No birds, no insects, nothing, just dead air. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring because they're trying so hard to hear something, anything. I stopped writing and listened, my pen frozen above the clipboard, and that's when I heard the breathing. Heavy, deep breaths from something big right outside the excavator. Steady and rhythmic, like whatever was making them was just standing there, waiting. My hand froze on the clipboard and my whole body went cold. I looked up through the cab windows, my heart already starting to race. They were standing at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 feet away, 2 of them. At first, my brain tried to make them into bears because that's what made sense, that's what should have been standing there. But bears don't stand upright like that, don't have those proportions, don't look at you with that kind of awareness. They were huge, had to be 8 or 9 feet tall, maybe more. It was hard to tell from my angle, but they towered over everything around them. Covered in hair, dark brown on one and lighter, almost grayish brown on the other. Thick hair that covered them from head to toe except for their faces. Massive shoulders, broader than any human I'd ever seen. Broader even than bodybuilders or the biggest guys I'd worked with. Arms that hung down past where their knees would be, long and powerful, ending in hands that looked like they could tear a tree apart. And their faces, God, their faces looked almost human, but not quite. Flatter, broader, with heavy brow ridges and a nose that was wider and flatter than any human nose, but with eyes that were watching me with intelligence. Real intelligence, not animal cunning. They knew I was in there, knew I could see them, and they were studying me the same way I was studying them. They were staring right at the excavator, right at me. My hands started shaking and I dropped the clipboard. The sound of it hitting the metal floor seemed impossibly loud in that silence, and I watched both of their heads turn slightly at the noise. Then they started moving toward me, not running, not charging, just walking with purpose. Each step was measured and deliberate and covered ground fast because of how big they were. I sat there frozen for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds, my brain trying to process what I was seeing, trying to make it make sense. They reached the excavator faster than I would have thought possible and started testing it, pushing on it, rocking it. The whole machine was moving. This multi-ton piece of equipment was swaying back and forth like it weighed nothing, and I could hear these sounds coming from their throats, low rumbling sounds like they were talking to each other, communicating. Deciding what to do about me. That snapped me out of it. Pure survival instinct kicked in, and I scrambled for the opposite door as one of them reached up and grabbed the door on my side. The metal screamed as it bent under its grip, this terrible shrieking sound of steel giving way to raw strength. I got the other door open and half fell out, hit the ground hard, felt the impact jar through my whole body. Rolled to my feet, my training taking over, and saw my truck parked maybe 30 yards away across the clearing. 30 yards that suddenly looked like 30 miles. I ran for it, ran harder than I've ever run in my life, legs pumping, arms swinging, breath tearing in my throat. The ground was uneven, and I nearly fell twice, but caught myself, kept moving. My truck was my only chance. If I could just get to it, get inside, get the engine started, maybe I could get out of there. I could hear them behind me, could feel the ground shaking with their footfalls, each step sending vibrations through the earth. They were fast, impossibly fast for something that size. My truck was right there, 20 yards, 15 yards, 10 yards. I could see my reflection in the window, see the terror on my own face. 5 yards. My hand touched the door handle and I felt a brief flash of hope. Then something hit me from behind like a freight train. The impact was enormous, drove all the air from my lungs in an instant. I slammed into the side of my truck, felt the metal give way under the force, felt my ribs compress, saw stars exploding across my vision. I spun around, back against the truck, barely able to breathe, and one of them was right there. Massive, blotting out the sky, blotting out everything. Its face was maybe 3 feet from mine, and I could smell it. That musky odor, but stronger now, overwhelming. Could see details I'd never wanted to see. The texture of its skin where the hair didn't cover, the yellow tint to its eyes, the way its chest moved with each breath. The last thing I saw was its hand coming toward my face, those massive fingers spreading wide. Then everything went black, and the pain and the fear and everything just disappeared into nothing. I don't know how long I was out that first time. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. Time had stopped meaning anything. When I came to, I was being dragged across the forest floor. I could feel sticks and rocks scraping against my back. Could feel my shirt riding up and the rough ground tearing at my skin. Could feel hands gripping my wrists above my head. Massive hands that wrapped all the way around my wrists, and then some, pulling me along like I weighed nothing. Everything was spinning and my head felt like it was going to split open, this pounding pain that made it hard to think, hard to focus on anything. I tried to look around, tried to understand what was happening, but everything was blurry and dark and moving too fast. The pain got too much and I blacked out again, welcomed the darkness because at least there was no pain there. Next time I woke up, I was being carried. I was over something's shoulder, bouncing with each massive step, my body folded over like a sack of grain. I could smell it, this musky, earthy smell that filled my nose and mouth and made me want to gag. Could feel the rough hair against my face and chest, could feel the powerful muscles moving underneath as it walked. I opened my eyes and saw the ground passing by far below me, had to be 8 or 9 feet down. Saw trees going by in the darkness, branches overhead forming a canopy that blocked out most of the light from the evening sky. I was so high up, higher than I'd ever been carried before, and the realization of what was carrying me hit me like another blow. The fear was so intense it was physical, a tightening in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I passed out again, my body just shutting down because it couldn't handle the fear. After that, it was just fragments, brief moments of awareness, always moving, always dark. No sense of time passing, no sense of how far we'd gone or in what direction, just the smell and the movement and the fear and then nothing again. Like my mind was protecting itself by shutting down, by refusing to process what was happening. I'd come to for a few seconds, see trees or rocks or darkness, feel the movement, and then slip away again. Over and over. How long did that go on? I have no idea. Could have been an hour, could have been all night. Time had lost all meaning. When I finally woke up for real, I was lying on cold stone. My whole body ached, every muscle screaming, my head pounding with a pain that made it hard to think straight. And I couldn't see anything, not just dark, but complete and total darkness like I'd never experienced. The kind of dark where you put your hand in front of your face and see nothing, where your eyes keep trying to adjust, but there's just nothing to adjust to, no light anywhere. I tried to move and every muscle screamed in protest, could feel that I was in some kind of cave, could feel the stone under me, rough and cold and damp. Could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance, each drop echoing in the darkness. And I could hear breathing, multiple sources of breathing all around me in the darkness. Not human breathing, these were deeper, slower, the breathing of something much larger than any person. I froze, didn't move a single muscle, didn't make a sound, barely even breathed. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it, sure the sound was echoing off the cave walls. The smell was overwhelming now. that musky animal smell mixed with something older and deeper. The smell of a place that had been lived in for a long time. Layers of scent built up over who knows how many years. I just lay there in the darkness, terrified, waiting for something to happen. Waiting to see if they were going to kill me right then, if this was it. If I was going to die in this cave without ever seeing daylight again. But nothing happened. The breathing continued, steady and deep. They were just sitting there in the dark, and so was I, just waiting. Hours seemed to pass like that, though I had no way to measure time. Just the sound of breathing and dripping water and my own heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Eventually, I saw light starting to filter in from somewhere deeper in the cave. Not much, just a dim glow, but after the complete darkness, it seemed bright. As my eyes adjusted, details started to emerge from the blackness. I could finally see where I was. It was a large chamber, bigger than any room I'd ever been in. The walls were rough stone, natural rock that looked like it had never been touched by human hands. The ceiling was high above me, lost in shadows even with the growing light. Several passages led off in different directions, black holes in the rock that could have led anywhere. And across the chamber from me, maybe 20 feet away, sitting against the opposite wall, were 3 of them. The 2 from the camp, I recognized them by their coloring. The one with dark brown hair and the one with the grayish-brown, lighter-colored hair. And a 3rd one, slightly smaller than the other 2, with hair that was more brown than the lighter one but not as dark as the first. They were just sitting there, cross-legged on the stone, watching me. Their eyes were focused on me with an intensity that was unnerving. When I moved my head to look around, they all shifted and made these grunting sounds, low and warning, telling me to be still. I froze again and they settled back down, seeming satisfied that I'd gotten the message. We stayed like that for a long time, just staring at each other. I was trying to understand what they wanted from me, trying to figure out if I was going to die here. Were they going to eat me? Were they keeping me as some kind of pet? Were they just curious about what a human was like? I had no answers, no way to know. Their faces gave away nothing. By what I guessed was the second day, though I had no real way to tell, I was weak with hunger and thirst. I hadn't eaten since lunch the day before I was taken, and I didn't know how long I'd been out, how much time had passed. My mouth was dry, tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth, my stomach cramping with hunger and maybe fear. That's when they brought food. One of them, the lighter-colored one, came over. It moved slowly, carefully, like it didn't want to spook me. Got close enough that I could have reached out and touched it if I dared, which I didn't. It dumped a pile of berries near me, just dropped them on the stone. Some of them were crushed and old, clearly picked a while ago, but some looked fresh, still had that shine to them. Then it dropped some fish, torn apart and raw, guts and scales still attached. The smell was terrible, but I was so hungry it didn't matter. When it backed away, moving with surprising gentleness for something so large, I crawled over and tried some of the berries. They were bitter, but edible. They watched me eat like they were curious about it, tilting their heads, making soft sounds to each other, almost like they were discussing me, comparing notes about the strange creature they'd brought back to their home. After I ate, one of them gestured toward one of the passages, just pointed with one massive finger, making these grunting sounds. I didn't understand at first, just stared at it, trying to figure out what it wanted. But it kept pointing and grunting, more insistent now. Finally, I crawled in that direction, weak and shaking, not sure if I was walking into a trap or what. The passage opened into a smaller chamber, maybe 10 feet across, and I could hear running water. There was a stream running through the rock, a natural spring or underground river, ice cold and crystal clear. I could see the bottom, see the way the water flowed over smooth stones. I drank until I couldn't drink anymore, scooping water into my mouth with my hands, letting it run down my chin and neck. It was the best water I'd ever tasted, clean and pure and cold enough to hurt my teeth. When I came back to the main chamber, they were still watching me, but they seemed almost satisfied, like they'd accomplished something, like they'd done their duty in keeping me alive. That became the routine. They'd bring food, watch me eat, let me go to the water whenever I needed. They'd leave for hours at a time, all three of them going out through one of the main passages, leaving me alone in the darkness. Then they'd come back and just sit there, watching me with those intelligent eyes. I spent the time trying to figure out what they wanted, why they'd taken me, but I couldn't understand it. They weren't hurting me, weren't threatening me beyond making it clear I shouldn't try to leave. But I was clearly a prisoner. I couldn't leave, couldn't do anything but sit there and wait and wonder what was going to happen to me. The days started to blur together, each one the same as the last. Wake up in darkness, eat what they brought, drink from the stream, sit and wait, over and over. On what I think was the third day, I tried to escape. They'd all left together, their footsteps fading away down the passage, and I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore. Waited until the only sound was my own breathing and the drip of water. Then I started exploring the passages, trying to find a way out. But the cave system was massive, bigger than I could have imagined. Passages branched off in every direction, going up and down and sideways. Some were wide enough to drive a truck through, others so narrow I had to turn sideways to fit. I got turned around quick, lost in the darkness, no sense of direction or which way led to the outside. Then I heard them coming back, their footsteps echoing through the stone, getting louder. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls. I tried to hide in the side passage, pressing myself against the wall, holding my breath. But they found me in minutes, must have tracked me by smell or sound or some sense I didn't understand. The big one, the one with the darkest hair that I'd started thinking of as the male, grabbed me by the arm. Its grip was like a vice, fingers wrapping all the way around my bicep with room to spare. It dragged me back to the main chamber, and it wasn't gentle about it. My feet barely touched the ground, scraping along the stone as it pulled me along like a misbehaving child. When we got back, it threw me down hard enough that I felt something in my ribs crack, heard the snap, and felt the sharp pain that meant something had broken. They all stood over me, making these loud, aggressive sounds, their voices echoing off the cave walls, making the air itself seem to vibrate. The message was clear even without words. Don't try that again. Stay where we put you. This is your place now. But on what I think was the fourth day, I did try again. Couldn't help it, couldn't just sit there and accept being a prisoner. Different direction this time, trying to be smarter about it. I got further, maybe a few hundred yards into the system. Some passages were so narrow I had to squeeze through, places where the creatures couldn't follow because of their size. I thought maybe I could use that, find a passage too small for them that led to the outside. But it was a maze down there, a labyrinth of stone and darkness. I got stuck in one spot, wedged between two rocks, had to back out with my heart pounding and my ribs screaming in pain. While I was backing out, they found me again. Must have known I was trying to escape, must have been watching or listening somehow. This time, two of them cornered me in the passage. I had nowhere to go, trapped between them with stone walls on either side. One of them hit me, an open palm to the chest, and it sent me flying backward into the cave wall. The impact drove all the air from my lungs, and I heard more ribs crack. Pain exploded through my whole torso, so intense I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only lie there gasping like a fish out of water. They dragged me back to the main chamber, rougher than before, one on each arm, my feet dragging behind me. I was hurting bad, could barely move without crying out. bruised all over, ribs that might have been cracked before now definitely broken, feeling like someone had worked me over with a baseball bat. I lay there on the stone and knew I couldn't try that again. Not yet. I was too hurt, too weak. One more beating like that and they might kill me intentionally or not. So I stopped trying to escape and started watching instead, started paying attention. On days 4 and 5, I changed my approach. Instead of trying to escape, I watched them. I studied their patterns, their routes, the way they moved and communicated. They always used the same main passages when they left. Always took the same route, the 3 of them moving in single file through the darkness. They'd go out in the morning, or what I thought was morning based on when the light seemed to get slightly brighter in the cave. They'd come back in the afternoon. Sometimes one would stay behind to watch me, usually the smaller one, but usually they all went together. When they came back, they'd bring food for themselves, and I got to see what they ate. Large amounts of food, enormous portions that would feed a whole family of humans. I watched them drag in a deer carcass once, a buck that had to weigh 200 pounds, and they hauled it in like it was nothing. Saw them tear into it with their teeth and hands, eating it raw, crunching through bones like they were crackers. Another time it was fish, big ones that looked like salmon and what looked like roots and plants. They'd eat together, sitting in a circle, passing food back and forth. And I realized they were a family. The way they interacted, the sounds they made to each other, the way the smaller one deferred to the larger ones, the way they shared food and seemed to care about each other. It was family behavior, no different from a family of humans in the essentials. I was terrified still, don't get me wrong. Every time one of them moved toward me, I'd tense up, expecting another beating. But I was also fascinated despite myself. These weren't just animals acting on instinct. They worked together, they planned, they communicated with a complexity that spoke of real intelligence. They had a social structure, rules, ways of doing things. The smaller one, the one I thought might be younger, maybe an offspring of the other two, would sometimes just sit and stare at me for hours. Not threatening, not aggressive, just watching with this curious expression, its head tilted to one side, eyes tracking my every movement, like it was trying to figure me out the same way I was trying to figure them out. Sometimes it would make soft sounds, almost like it was talking to itself. I wondered what it was thinking, what it saw when it looked at me. Did it see me as some strange animal they'd captured, as a curiosity, as a threat? On the 5th day, I started testing my theory about their routes. I'd pretend to sleep when they left in the morning, lying still on the stone with my eyes closed and my breathing slow and steady. Then I'd wait longer than before, maybe 2 hours of silence, making sure they were really gone and not just testing me. Then I'd follow the main passage they always took, moving slow and quiet as I could, trying not to make any sound that might echo. My ribs hurt with every breath, but I pushed through it. I'd stop every few minutes to listen, making sure they weren't coming back, that I wasn't about to get caught again. I could hear sounds in the distance, their calls to each other outside wherever they were hunting or gathering. Those same whooping sounds we'd heard at the logging camp. But now I knew exactly what made them, knew there was intelligence behind those calls. I'd follow the passage for a while, memorizing the turns, the splits, which way they went at each junction, creating a map in my head because I had nothing to write with, no way to leave marks. Then I'd retreat back to the main chamber before they returned, lying down in the same spot, pretending I'd never moved. They never seemed to notice I'd moved, never gave any sign that they knew. But I was learning the layout, learning the way out. I did it again that afternoon when they left, probably to go get more food. Went further this time, mapping more of the route in my head, adding to the mental picture I was building. The passage led upward, gradually climbing at an angle that was steady enough to walk, but steep enough that I knew it was going somewhere. That meant it probably led to an exit somewhere higher up on the mountain. That's what I was counting on, what I was hoping for. Most caves have multiple entrances, places where water has worn through the rock or where the stone has shifted and cracked. I just had to find one big enough for me to fit through. By the end of the 5th day, I thought I had it figured out, thought I knew the way out. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow I'd make my move. One last chance to get out of there before I got too weak, before I couldn't make the journey even if I knew the way. The 6th day was my last chance, and I knew it. I could feel myself getting weaker. I'd lost weight, could feel my ribs sticking out more than they should, could see my wrists looking thinner when I looked down at them in the dim light. My body was battered and bruised, every movement hurt, and I didn't know how much longer I could survive down there. Another week, and I might not have the strength to make the climb out even if I knew the way. When they left that morning, all 3 together like usual, I knew it was now or never. This was it. Either I got out today or I died in this cave. I waited an hour, listening hard for any sound of them returning, every nerve on edge. Nothing. Just the drip of water and my own breathing echoing off the stone, sounding loud in the silence. I started moving, followed the main passage just like I'd memorized it over the past 2 days. Every turn, every split, every junction where the passage branched off in multiple directions. Left here, right there, straight ahead at the next one. The passage climbed steadily upward and it was hard going. I was weak and injured and every step hurt, my ribs screaming with every breath, my legs shaking from exhaustion and hunger. Some sections were so steep I had to climb, pulling myself up with my hands, using cracks in the rock as handholds, my feet scrabbling for purchase on the smooth stone. My palms were soon bleeding on the rough rock laying, leaving smears of blood on the stone that I hoped they wouldn't see if they came back this way. The darkness was almost complete in some places, just that dim, filtered light, and I had to feel my way along the walls, trusting my memory and my hands to guide me. One wrong turn and I'd be lost, might never find my way back even if I wanted to. Time lost all meaning. It felt like I'd been climbing for hours, but it might have been less, might have been more. No way to tell in the timeless darkness of the cave. Several times I thought I'd gotten lost, that I'd taken a wrong turn somewhere, that this wasn't the right passage. I'd have to backtrack, retrace my steps, try again, waste precious time. My legs were shaking with exhaustion, threatening to give out. My ribs felt like they were on fire with every breath, each inhalation like someone was driving a knife between my ribs. But I kept moving because the alternative was dying in that cave, and I wasn't ready to die. Not yet, not like this. I had too much to live for, too much I still wanted to do. I just had to make it out of this cave, make it back to civilization, and I could start over, put this whole nightmare behind me. Then I saw it, far ahead, barely visible around a bend in the passage, real light. Not the dim glow from somewhere in the cave, but actual sunlight. Daylight filtering in from outside, bright and beautiful, and meaning freedom. I almost cried with relief, felt tears stinging my eyes for the first time since this whole thing started. I moved faster, as fast as I could manage, being careful not to make too much noise, echo through the passages, but unable to stop myself from hurrying. The light got stronger as I got closer, and I could feel fresh air on my face. Real air, not the dead, stale air of the cave. Could smell the forest, smell trees and earth and life. Almost there, just a little bit further. The opening was narrow, high up in the face of the mountain, just a crack in the rock that light was streaming through. I had to squeeze through, turning sideways, scraping my shoulders on both sides, feeling the rough stone catching on my clothes and skin. For a moment, I thought I might be too big, might get stuck there in the opening with freedom just feet away. But I pushed harder, ignoring the pain, ignoring the way the rock was tearing at my skin. Then I was through, outside in the real world, breathing fresh air, feeling sunlight on my face for the first time in 6 days. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. I wanted to just collapse right there, lie in the sun, and let the warmth soak into my bones. But I couldn't. I was on a steep, rocky slope, loose stones and scree, the forest spread out below me. And somewhere down there, or back in those caves, were those creatures. And I had no idea when they'd notice I was gone, when they'd come looking for me. I had to keep moving. I started climbing down the slope, trying to move quickly but carefully. The rocks were loose under my feet, shifting and sliding with every step. It was treacherous, and I fell twice, tumbling a few feet before catching myself on a rock or a bush, scraping my hands raw. When I reached the tree line, I wanted to just start running, put as much distance as possible between myself and that cave. But I forced myself to be careful, to move slowly and quietly, because I knew they were out here somewhere, hunting or gathering or whatever they did. The forest was full of places to hide, but also full of places where they might be waiting. I found their footprints in soft ground after a while, massive impressions in the dirt, each one bigger than my whole foot, pressed deep into the earth. Fresh ones, the edges still sharp, meaning they'd been through here recently, maybe that morning, maybe in the last hour. No way to tell. I changed direction, going the opposite way, my heart racing, tried to move quietly but quickly, every sense on high alert. I heard their calls in the distance, those whooping sounds I'd heard at the logging camp what felt like a lifetime ago. Now I knew exactly what made those sounds, and it made my skin crawl, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Every time I heard them, I'd freeze and try to figure out which direction they were coming from, try to triangulate their position. Then I'd move the opposite way, putting distance between us. They were hunting, but I didn't think they were hunting me yet. Didn't think they'd realized I was gone. Twice I had to hide. Once when the calls got closer than I wanted, I pressed myself into a hollow at the base of a huge tree. Made myself as small as possible, barely breathing, trying to become part of the tree itself. Something large moved through the underbrush nearby, heavy footfalls that shook the ground, breaking branches. I could hear it breathing, those same deep breaths I'd heard in the cave. It passed maybe 20 feet away, close enough that I could smell it, that musky odor that I'd never forget. Another time, I crawled under a fallen log and lay there for what felt like forever. The log was rotting, full of bugs and moisture, but I didn't care. I just lay there, face pressed into the dirt, while I heard heavy footsteps passing not 20 feet away. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. Thought surely it could hear the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. But whatever it was moved on, and eventually the sound faded. The forest seemed to go on forever. The sun was moving across the sky, afternoon turning toward evening, and I was getting more desperate. I was exhausted, dehydrated again despite the water I'd drunk that morning, every part of me hurting. But I kept moving, had to keep moving. If I stopped, if I gave up, they'd find me. And I didn't think they'd be as gentle this time. I'd betrayed their trust, broken whatever rules they'd been keeping me under. Finally, after what felt like days but was probably hours, I started recognizing the terrain. That outcropping of rock looked familiar, that particular stand of trees. I was near the logging road, had to be. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the pain, ignoring the exhaustion. Just a little bit further. I found it, that rough dirt track we'd driven in on, and I could have kissed the ground. could have fallen to my knees and cried with relief. But I didn't have time, had to keep moving. I followed it toward town, stumbling more than walking now. My legs were barely working, shaking with every step, threatening to give out completely. I was running on pure adrenaline and fear, my body long past exhausted, operating on nothing but the desperate need to survive. But I could see the town in the distance, those few buildings at the edge of the forest, civilization, safety, people who could help me. I made it to the edge of town, behind the general store where I'd bought supplies that first week, the place where the old man had warned me about the old families in the woods. And that's when everything caught up with me. My legs gave out and I collapsed in the alley between the store and the building next to it. Hit the ground hard, didn't even try to catch myself. The last thing I remember is someone shouting, running toward me, hands on my shoulders, a voice asking if I was okay. And then everything went black again, and this time I was grateful for it. Grateful to not have to be strong anymore, to not have to keep moving. I could finally just let go. I woke up in the town's small clinic. It was more like a doctor's office than a real hospital, just a few rooms in a converted house. The kind of place small towns have when they can't afford a real medical facility. The doctor was standing over me, an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes. And the sheriff was there too, a big man in his 50s with a weathered face that said he'd seen a lot in his time. They were both looking at me like I was a ghost, like they couldn't quite believe I was real, that I was alive. The doctor started checking me over, professional and efficient, while the sheriff asked me questions. What happened? Where had I been? Was I hurt anywhere? His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern underneath. I told them I'd been taken, that I'd been in a cave for 6 days. My voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper, and it hurt to talk. The sheriff and the doctor exchanged a look, one of those looks that says they're communicating without words. The sheriff asked me taken by what, and his voice was careful, measured. I started to tell them. About the creatures, about being dragged into the forest, about the cave. About those 6 days of darkness and fear and not knowing if I'd ever see the sun again. The doctor stopped me and said I'd been through a trauma, that I needed to rest. Her voice was gentle but firm. But the sheriff, he got this look on his face. He told the doctor to give us a minute, and then he sat down next to my bed, pulled up a chair, and leaned in close. He said the locals had stories about those woods, stories that went back generations, passed down from parents to children, that he'd heard things himself over the years, seen things he couldn't explain, had his own encounters that he'd never told anyone about because who would believe him? He said he believed me, and I could hear in his voice that he meant it, but that it wouldn't matter. That belief wasn't enough. I asked him what he meant, and he just shook his head, this sad, resigned gesture. Said my company had been looking for me, that they'd searched the whole area with dogs and helicopters and everything. Said they were sending people down from corporate, suits from the city who'd want answers, and those answers couldn't include what I'd just told him. The company reps showed up the next day, right on schedule. 2 men in suits, expensive ones that probably cost more than I made in a month. The kind of guys who work in offices and have never set foot in a forest in their lives, never done a day of real work. They came into my room with paperwork and serious faces and the kind of professional demeanor that said this was just business to them. Nothing personal. They told me I'd had an accident, that I'd gotten lost in the forest, suffered from dehydration and exposure, that my mind had played tricks on me, that I'd hallucinated the whole thing. It was a common response to trauma, they said, the brain trying to make sense of something it couldn't understand. I started to argue, but they cut me off, held up their hands in a gesture that said they weren't interested in hearing it. One of them put a piece of paper on the bed next to me. A settlement agreement printed on official company letterhead. 6 figures, they said, and they said it like it was nothing. Like that kind of money wasn't life-changing. Full medical leave, full pay for the leave, and a substantial settlement payment. All I had to do was sign the paper saying I got lost and injured. No mention of what really happened, no mention of anything that might make the company look bad or scare off future contracts or open them up to liability. Just a simple story about a supervisor who got turned around in the woods and had a tough time making it back. I asked what happened if I didn't sign. They both just looked at me with these flat expressions, cold eyes that said they'd done this before, that they knew how it would play out. The message was clear, even though they didn't say it out loud. Sign or else. Sign or have problems. Sign or find yourself in legal trouble, sued for breach of contract, your reputation destroyed. Sign or never work again in this industry. They weren't threatening me directly, they were too smart for that, too professional. But I understood. I'd been around long enough to know how the game was played. They told me my crew had already been transferred to other sites, scattered across the country, working different jobs, probably told not to talk about what happened, that the equipment had been moved out, taken to another site, or sold, or just disappeared. That it was like we'd never been there, like that camp had never existed. The local authorities had been briefed, they said, and I knew what that meant. The sheriff had been told to keep quiet, probably paid off or pressured or both. Everyone understood what the official story was. I could take the money and move on, start fresh somewhere else, put this whole thing behind me, or I could fight it and lose everything. It wasn't really a choice at all. I signed the papers. I'm not proud of it, but I signed. What else was I going to do? Fight some giant corporation with infinite money and lawyers? Tell my story to people who would think I was crazy? The money showed up in my account 3 days later, more than I'd ever seen at once. They set me up with medical leave, 6 months full pay while I recovered. I went home and tried to recover, tried to put it behind me and move on with my life. The physical injuries healed, mostly. The ribs took time, but they mended, stopped hurting when I breathed. The bruises faded from purple to yellow to nothing. The cuts and scrapes healed over, but other things didn't heal. The things inside, the things you can't see, those stayed broken. I can't go into forests anymore. I tried once just to walk in a state park near my house. Thought maybe I could ease back into it, face my fears. Got maybe 50 yards in before the panic hit me. Heart racing, can't breathe, chest tight like someone was sitting on it. Seeing things in the shadows that aren't there, every sound making me jump. I had to turn around and get out, practically ran back to my car. Haven't tried since. Can't even look at pictures of forests without feeling that tightness in my chest, that fear creeping in. The nightmares are worse. I dream about the cave, about the darkness, about those faces watching me from across the chamber. I dream about being dragged through the forest, about waking up on that cold stone, about the smell and the sounds and the fear of not knowing if I'd ever see daylight again. I wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes convinced I'm back there, that I never really escaped, that this whole thing, my life now, is just a dream I'm having in that cave. It takes me a while to remember where I am, to understand that I'm safe in my own bed, in my own home, to realize that I really did get out, that it's over. But it never really feels over. The money sits in my account and it feels wrong every time I look at it, like I sold something important, something true for cash, like I betrayed myself and what I know to be real. But what choice did I have? They made sure there was no evidence, no proof, nothing but my word against their official story. And who's going to believe me anyway? Who's going to believe that there are creatures out there that science says don't exist? That I was held captive by a family of Sasquatch for 6 days? It sounds crazy even to me sometimes when I'm trying to think about it rationally. The local paper ran a small article about it. Logger missing for 6 days, found alive. Just a few paragraphs buried on page 5 where nobody would really see it. No details about where I'd been or how I survived. Just that I'd gotten lost and been found by some hikers who heard me calling for help. A nice, simple story that didn't raise any questions. Nothing about what really happened, nothing about the truth. Just another story of someone who got turned around in the woods and had a hard time finding their way back. Happens all the time. Nothing to see here. I'm left with the memories and the questions. Why did they take me? What did they want? I've thought about it a lot, lying awake at night when the dreams won't let me sleep, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of it. Were they just curious about me? Was I invading their territory and they were making a point, showing me that I didn't belong there? Were they protecting something deeper in those woods? Were they studying me the same way scientists study animals? I'll never know. There's no way to know. They can't talk, or at least they didn't talk to me, and I couldn't understand their sounds well enough to know what they were saying to each other. Sometimes I wonder if they were showing me mercy in their own way. They fed me, showed me water, didn't kill me even though they easily could have. They could have torn me apart, could have ended it any time they wanted, but they didn't. Maybe taking me was their way of warning me off without killing me. Maybe they understood I'd tell others and we'd leave those woods alone. If that was the plan, it worked. I'm never going back there. Never going near those woods again. And I tell anyone who asks that they shouldn't either. Those woods are dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with getting lost or breaking a leg or any normal forest danger. But I know they're real. I know they're out there in those deep woods where nobody goes. The locals know it too. That's why they wouldn't take the logging contract. They know to leave those woods alone, to respect what lives there. They've probably known for generations, passing the knowledge down in whispers and warnings. We came in like we owned the place, like we had every right to cut down their trees and tear up their land. Like the whole world was ours to do with as we pleased. And they responded, not with words or lawyers or any human way, but in their own way. They showed me I didn't belong there, that some places aren't meant for humans, and they did it without killing me, which I think says something about them, about their intelligence and maybe even their morality. I'm telling this story now because I need someone to know the truth. Even if you don't believe me, even if you think I'm crazy or making it up, or that I hallucinated the whole thing, I need to put it out there. What happened to me was real. Those 6 days in that cave were real. Those creatures are real. I saw them with my own eyes. I was held by them. I escaped from them. It all really happened. I've got the scars to prove it, the nightmares, the panic attacks. This isn't the story of someone who got lost and confused. This is the story of someone who saw something that shouldn't exist but does. The company did their job well. There's no evidence, no proof, nothing to back up my story. The camp is gone, torn down, and moved like it never existed. The equipment is gone, sold or transferred or destroyed. My crew is scattered across the country working other jobs, probably with their own settlement agreements and NDAs. The locals won't talk about it with outsiders. They never have, and they never will. The official story is all that exists on paper, in the records, in the news. But I know the truth, and now you do too. That has to count for something, has to mean something. They're out there, in the old forests, the deep woods, the places where humans don't usually go. Living their lives, protecting their territory, staying hidden, raising their young, gathering their food, existing in a world that runs parallel to ours but rarely intersects with it. And maybe that's how it should be. Maybe we should leave them alone. We've taken enough from this world, cut down enough forests, paved over enough wilderness. invaded enough wild places. Maybe there should be some places that are off limits, some places that belong to them and not to us. Maybe we need to accept that the world is bigger than we think, stranger than we imagine, and that we don't have the right to every corner of it. I don't know if telling this story will make any difference. I don't know if anyone will believe me or care, but I needed to tell it anyway. For my own peace of mind, for whatever that's worth. For the truth, because the truth matters even when nobody believes it. I know what happened to me. I know what I saw, and I know that somewhere out there in the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest, there's a family of creatures that most people think are just legends. Stories told around campfires, myths, and folklore. But they're not legends. They're not myths. They're real as you or me. I've got the scars and the nightmares to prove it, and nothing anyone says can take that away from me. I'm done with logging, done with forests, done with that whole life. I took a job in the city, working construction, building things instead of tearing them down. It feels better somehow, creating instead of destroying. I live in an apartment now, 3rd floor in a building surrounded by other buildings, surrounded by concrete and steel and people and noise. It's safe here. There's nothing in the shadows, nothing watching me. No sound in the night that I can't explain, no smells that don't belong. At least that's what I tell myself. At least that's what I need to believe to get through the day. But sometimes late at night, when it's quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, when I can't sleep because of the dreams, I wonder about them. Are they still there in that cave system? Do they remember me? Did they talk about the human they caught and kept for 6 days? Do they tell stories about me the way I'm telling stories about them? Do they understand why I ran, why I had to escape? Do they think I betrayed them somehow by leaving? I'll never know the answers to those questions. There's no way to go back, no way to ask them. And even if I could, I wouldn't. I'm too afraid. Not afraid they'd hurt me, but afraid of what it would mean, afraid of having to face it all again. What I do know is this: the world is bigger and stranger than most people realize. There are things out there that science doesn't acknowledge, that most people don't believe in. Things that exist in the spaces between what we know and what we think is possible. But belief doesn't change reality. Those creatures exist whether people believe in them or not, whether scientists accept them or not, whether the official story acknowledges them or not. I know because I was there. I was their prisoner for 6 days. And I survived to tell about it. That's not something I can unknow. It's not something I can forget, no matter how much I might want to sometimes. So believe me or don't, it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the truth. I know what I experienced, and nobody can take that away from me. Not the company with their money and their paperwork and their official stories. Not the people who say I'm crazy or making it up. Not even my own doubts in the dark hours of the night when I wonder if maybe I did hallucinate it all. Because I know I didn't. I know it was real. The truth is the truth. And the truth is that I was held captive by a Sasquatch family for 6 days in a cave system somewhere in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest. And somehow, against all odds, despite being outnumbered and outmatched and in their territory, I made it out alive. I survived something that probably would have killed most people. And now I have to figure out how to live with that. That's my story. That's what really happened. And I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life, whether anyone believes it or not. It's part of me now, woven into who I am. I'm not the same person who drove into those woods 2 weeks ago. That person died in that cave, or at least changed so much he might as well have died. The person who walked out, who made it back to town, who signed those papers and took that money, that's someone new, someone who knows things about the world that most people don't. Someone who's seen behind the curtain and can't unsee it. And I have to live with that knowledge every day, have to carry that weight. But at least I'm alive to carry it. At least I made it out. And maybe someday that will be enough. Maybe someday I'll be able to think about those 6 days without the fear, without the panic. Maybe someday I'll even be able to talk about it without my hands shaking. But not today. Not yet. For now, all I can do is tell my story and hope that someone, somewhere, believes me. Hope that the truth matters, even when it's a truth that nobody wants to hear. For more interesting stories, check this out.